I bet you.
If you try to sit on down, you're gonna fall, I bet you. If you want a winning hand, if you want a perfect hand, bet you never lose my love, you will win, I bet you. Bet you never lose my love, you will win, I bet you. Take a car, ain't gonna move, and I bet ya a carpenter can't build his house without his tools. I bet ya.
If your shoes are too small to hurt your feet, and I bet you.
You can't know what's going on if you see. I bet ya. If you want a winning hand, if you want a perfect hand, bet you never lose my love, you will win, I bet ya. Oh yeah. Bet you never lose my love, you got to win, I bet ya. Wow, 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 wow. Get down. Come on. Bet ya. You ain't gonna lose. Oh, that's by you. You won't lose. Oh, yeah.
Welcome, patrons. We're in the post game. Thanks to those of you that are just joining the Michael Brooks Show Guerrilla Army. We're moving. We're closing in on that 1K. Thank you all so much. Lot to get to in this post game. I am still very pissed at these troglodytes trying to take Sam down. It makes me very tribal, including suffering succotash himself, Mike Cernovich. Although I guess if I had a voice like that, I might be a prick too. We've got some sound from Morning Joe that Right Wing Mandela is going to respond to. We have some brilliant Vic Berger on two complete implosions of humanity and masculinity, Mike Cernovich and James O'Keefe. And speaking of craziness, the whole thing is crazy. Professor Peterson, we have a whole segment he did about individuality. The whole thing is crazy. Jam-packed for you patrons. But first, and of course, joined by super producer Matt Leck, super producer David Slavic, off-site, holding it all down, and of course, and in fact, David Grishcom, who is now agreed to appear on mic. He used to have a lot of sort of, I would prefer to not be on mic. I only express myself through the written word, was the first thing he said to me. And I said, dude, can you just go on mic a little bit? And he said, microphones are commodified. No, dude, introduce yourself, or I'm going to keep saying nonsense.
How are y'all?
David Grishcom, thank you. David doing really, really good work for us. on the theory reading series, which you can all follow up on in the theory reading vehicle section of Discord. And we're going to start building more content around breaking down that those reading series, because they're heavy duty. But before we get to all of that, it is my honor, at the beginning of this post game, joining us now is the great broadcast journalist, co-host of the very, very, very good podcast, Struggle Session, where I have appeared as a guest, and I recommend everybody immediately check out, Leslie Lee III. Leslie, how are you?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me on.
It's my just absolute pleasure, man. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Leesburg, Virginia. It's outside of D.C. in Loudoun County. It is the highest income per capita county in the nation because there's so many defense contractors here. My next door neighbor works for like Raytheon. There's millionaires who live in my apartment building because they're between homes at the moment. They're building their mansions. So like there's a Tesla in the parking garage. I'm not balling like that, not even close. I think every day about just robbing one of these dudes. But yeah.
Yes. Does Raytheon underwrite Struggle Session?
Not yet. Yet. We are open to all, ethical sponsorships. I think Raytheon. I've been hearing they've been doing a fantastic job, and people are talking more and more about it. And we will welcome them to sponsor our show. Like, absolutely.
Did you ever see? And I won't, only if this is easy, because this is an obscure one. But if you can find it and it's easy, Matt. But because you made that joke, did you ever see the tweet where, because of course you're referring to the great moment when Trump said, Frederick Douglass is doing a great job. More and more people are acknowledging it, hearing about it. And this comedian, and they found a picture of Frederick Douglass. Now, first of all, everybody in that time period, when they took some type of formal portrait, looked like they were about to be sent to their death. It was a very serious time. And then, of course, Frederick Douglass is just this sort of extraordinarily distinguished looking human being. And so they got this picture of Frederick Douglass where he basically is oozing everything that Donald Trump is not, right? You look at Donald Trump and Frederick Douglass side by side, and you're like, how are these two how are they even existing in the same reality, right? Frederick Douglass is superior in every conceivable metric to Donald Trump. And the guy tweeted out that image, and then under it was and he tweeted, "The face you make when you're doing a great job," and more and more people are talking about it. It was so perfect.
Yeah, I definitely saw that one, but I also did my own too. I posted a picture of Frederick Douglass and with the kind of Hotepi title. They don't want you to know that Karl Marx was actually a black man.
And, dude, yes, I see it. I see that.
Yeah, and a lot of people retweeted it because it was funny, but some people were like, wait a minute, hold up. Karl Marx was they really believed I was being legit, and I don't want to dispel them of that notion.
You want to do we should do a DSA racial draft version? Remember the old Chappelle sketch, the racial draft?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you guys get Marx, all right. So who are we going to get if you take Marx? I have to ask all of the white men in my studio. You want Marx? I'm going to take. I want CLR James and Mandela for Marx.
And Mandela. All right. Fair trade.
I don't know if that's a fair trade. I played a very white game there. Well, I'm going to watch two of you. So, tell everybody who hasn't copped it yet. I'm really serious about this. Struggle Session is really good. What are you guys doing with Struggle Session? What's it about?
All right, so we started the show because we saw a space for leftists to talk about things like pop culture and superhero movies and comic books and video games, because the right is doing it, the center is doing it, but the left doesn't really engage with these forms of pop culture in a way, except to maybe like name and shame stuff, right? But like people enjoy all these superhero movies, and leftists enjoy them too, even though their politics are really bad, right? They enjoy playing video games, even though a lot of video game culture, it can be very toxic. And so basically the struggle that we have is, and all these things that I'm talking about, they're all products of like hyper capitalism, more or less. Like they're owned by mega corporations, but we still enjoy them and love them, and they bring something to our lives. And we just wanted to create a space where leftists can say, hey, I enjoy this product. I can like Batman, even though I know Batman is a fascist character owned by
He is a surly fascist, and he is what Rudy Giuliani jerks himself off to every night.
And absolutely, but still, as a leftist, I get so much out of him, and we talk about that. We talk about why we enjoy these things, why, even though they're still problematic. And also, I think it's been very relevant recently with the whole Hollywood sexual predator scandal, because there's a lot of people who have turned out to be sexual predators, even though like a lot of them are in your favorite movies, right? And so like you can't just throw all those memories away. You can't, or musicians too, you can't just pretend like you no longer like this band anymore because of what they did as human beings. You kind of have to come to a place where you acknowledge that all this art that we love can be made by terrible people, can be owned by terrible people, but we can still get something out of it because the art itself is of value, is something worthwhile in and of itself. It's a product of flawed human beings always, no matter what it is. And you don't have to, like, you're not compromising your leftism or your politics because you enjoy some problematic media or even sometimes like reactionary stuff, like say 24. Like I love the show 24, even though it's racist, it's homophobic, xenophobic, but there's still something I can pro-torture, like terrible politics, but millions of people enjoy it, like including myself.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, I think that it's also very important, again, that politics isn't just, I mean, I want to get to performing wokeness in a second with you, but I think that the other thing that I like that you guys are doing, and I mean this, like, this is just my read on it. So, it might be, not what you had in mind or whatever, but if people go back to Stuart Hall, right? Stuart Hall was a very important Jamaican British theorist, and you hear, his work is there's kind of two ways in which I feel like his work has been distorted, at least as I read it. I mean, there's this kind of generic poppy sort of like pseudo woke leftism, or not leftism, the woke neoliberal garbage, the type of people who would say, like, I don't know, if Raytheon provides, like, if Raytheon has some like good social initiative, then they're great. It's fine that they provide, weapons for every atrocity across the planet, probably, as long as, if they have like some sort of like forward-thinking corporate manifesto on recycling or something, right? Or transgender rights, which of course is very important, but does not make up for being an instrument of global human rights violations. And those kind of people, they kind of gravitated towards, like, politics doesn't matter, it's all culture. And so, hey, even if the safety net is being destroyed, systems of classism, racism, misogyny are reinformed and reinforcing themselves across all segments of society, we can just celebrate Beyonce's latest halftime show. Now, I'm not being like a scold. Beyonce's dope, but like, okay, so what, right? Like, I mean, so what, something, but not so what relative to the broader system. And then on the other hand, there's the kind of like reverse reaction of like, well, we're good lefties, so we don't enjoy ourselves, and we just, like drink like bland tea and decry everything. But Stuart Hall actually said that what is happening in popular texts is that marginalized communities generate their own reading of them and reformat them and reconstitute them for their own values. So it's not either of those extremes, right? It isn't like, oh, there's this hegemonic culture that is oppressing us and we have no power over it. And it's also not like, oh, awesome, now Nike recognizes us, or Raytheon recognizes us, or Revlon recognizes us, so it's all good. It's an interplay of dominance, and then people on the margins take that dominance, then they reinterpret it and respit it and remix it for their own ends. And I feel like, honestly, you guys are doing that all the time when you're talking about wrestling and comic books and horror movies and gangster movies.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do, is like we're trying to create our own, way of engaging with these things, which isn't what the corporations want, and isn't just, pushing them aside and judging them. It's because, like, I'm sorry if I'm, hurting anybody's feelings by saying this, but leftists are in power, and we're not going to take power overnight, unfortunately.
Right, of course.
Right. So we have to live in this world, and most people do. And if you're going to live in a under hyper-capitalism, like it's okay to, watch a movie or enjoy a TV show or listen to music without constantly, like, woke checking yourself,
Right. Well, that's another thing. I mean, you wrote, I want you to talk about your Bernie Sanders making you white piece, because it goes back to this, a really big problem right now is, I would concede that there are some people on the actual left who are not sensitive, sometimes really reductive and not sophisticated with regards to race, gender, and other issues and other really important kind of core drivers. And then on the flip side, you have these people who, coming out of the Clinton campaign, really, really doubled down on, using the most up-to-date, bespoke, woke language is the most important thing on the planet, and income inequality and death and destruction and capitalism and unemployment and global war, these things are all totally irrelevant. And you have a lot of insights about that I'd like you to share.
Yeah, so with the Berman made me white thing, right? It basically started because every time...
It was such a good piece, man.
Oh, thank you. So it basically started because if you were any kind of POC on Twitter during the war of 2016, the Democratic primary that we're all still relitigating and refighting, if you were a POC and you support Sanders, like, you were dismissed, you were belittled, you were told you didn't exist, you were accused of being a white person with a black person's avatar. This happened to I know Bree,
yes,
who's been on the show several times. She's
part of the crew, the Michael Brooks Show crew.
Oh yeah.
And I just will say, just for patrons in full transparency, she is white.
we just for the patrons, we're not going to say this out in public. But, like, so you always dealt with that. So and the media was propping up a lot of this too. Like, every lazy New York Times and Washington Post article would just say, well, Sanders has a race problem, without really delving into it in a sophisticated way. There was always just an assumption that black people don't like Sanders, people of color don't like Sanders. And it got so bad where it was like, I actually said with Benjamin Dixon, we were having a conversation, I basically said, Sanders is going to, like, win Hawaii, which is a majority non-white state, and people are going to decide that is suddenly a white state. And that's exactly what happened. They literally called Hawaii largely rural, and Alaska too, largely rural and largely white, when they're like the two least white states in the country. And so I made hashtag, well, I guess Burmy made me white, so I'm going to start binge watching Friends.
Yeah, well, I was curious, are there any other things that you took up with whiteness? I'm assuming more Mayo, Friends, anything else?
I wish I had gotten on, like, good credit score, having savings, parents who leave you a bunch of money, that inheritance.
I have to say, along with my middle name, I'm really resenting a lot of these, like, Mr. White things that I didn't get it, including, like, credit score and inheritance. Like, I got fucked on those angles, man.
But yeah, so that started. It became a trending topic because it was bothering so many people that, like, because it's not like the choice between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton was, like, really split along racial lines. We could go into the stats and the polls, et cetera, et cetera. But I think fundamentally people understand that like the differences between those two candidates had absolutely nothing to do with like the as far as their policy goes, had nothing really to do with race, right? Like there was it's not like Hillary Clinton was like doing reparations, and
Hillary Clinton was the Marcus Garvey of the 21st century. I mean, she was super, mad, totally for reparations. Sure. I remember, I've said this so many times, but I mean, when that Ta-Nehisi piece came out calling out Bernie Sanders on reparations, and people who supported Hillary Clinton sharing that was the most fucking unbelievable thing. Like it was like, yeah, that's right. And I was like, and Hillary's record? I'm like, what? And Hillary's like, and that's why I supported the death penalty. Say,
I kind of had to call out Ta-Nehisi on that because, like, he says in the piece, like, his justification for writing it just at Bernie Sanders is because Bernie Sanders calls himself a radical, so he's judging him by radical standards, which, one, doesn't make sense, and two, isn't true. Bernie Sanders doesn't actually call himself a radical. But I was very disappointed in Ta-Nehisi Coates because his only real contribution to the election was given, white liberals cover for voting for Hillary Clinton and writing a really bad Black Panther comic book. Like that's it. That's all the James Baldwin of our time had to contribute to the political discourse.
Well, there's going to be a fire next time, and by which I will be voting for the candidate that will do nothing about social justice because the guy in the Atlantic gave me permission. So great.
Yeah.
As a final, final sort of thoughts from you. I mean, do you think this stuff is still big on social media, and there's definitely like a weird synergy between like serious money interests that want to make sure that there isn't an actual left politics, and then kind of people who have either emotional attachments to certain things with Hillary Clinton, whatever the kind of weird emotional stuff they're playing out with, or I think even other people who just have like a kind of market position for their politics, and frankly that implicates all of us in some ways if we're being honest. But I think that like at least, it's a victory for us that people like Christian Gillibrand and fucking Max Baucus. I mean, even though he's retired, like Max Baucus, there is no bigger corporate whore on the planet than Max Baucus. And the fact that he's coming out for national single payer and of course, Kamala Harris. I mean, this means that the trend is moving in our direction somewhat. I think people should be less pessimistic in that way. What do you think as a final thought, man?
Yeah, so I said this since is it Tulsi Gabbard? Tulsi Gabbard came out for Bernie Sanders. I basically said, all right, when we start getting like the mercenaries and the social climbers on our side, then we know we're winning. Like that's the sign that we're winning. Like I'm not saying to trust these people. I'm not saying to ignore their history, but that's we can take that as a good sign.
Leslie, I think that's perfect. Everybody should check out Struggle Session. It's a great podcast. We shared it for all of our patrons when I was on it. I'm looking forward to doing a lot more with you, man. Leslie Lee III. Everybody check him out. We'll have a link to your Twitter, but it's at it's at Leslie Lee. I can't.
Leslie Lee III.
Yes, and there'll be a link to it on the show.
And actually, I do want to do one quick plug. We'll be having a live telethon this Thursday night. All the details are on patreon.com/struggle session or our Twitter page, twitter.com/struggle session. So we'll be doing live call-ins. We'll have celebrity guests.
Awesome.
Justin Bieber's on board. Chachi. Like everybody. Well, they're not on board, but subject to availability. But
let me tell you something, man. If you want to Hotep Obama, you let me know.
Oh, absolutely.
He might be interested in supporting your efforts potentially. I'll reach out to a representative.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, man. Take care.
All right, peace.
Thanks, Leslie. All right, I'm going to call into the phone system now. But Matt, do you have a preference as to what sound we start with? I want your professional opinion as the super producer.
Well, we can go with one of the ones we've discussed before, but we also have a Vic Berger edit of Mike Cernovich basically pointing people towards Comet Ping Pong Pizza in Pizzagate, which he denies doing, and which NPR profile of Cernovich over the weekend said he did not do. It bought his line that he never mentioned the actual restaurant name, but he did. Vic Berger has conducted a nice bit of journalism showing that is actually false.
So apparently, of course, Vic Berger does a better job than a fucking mediocre NPR reporting. And again, to remind everybody, this is the scum, the troglodyte who is trying to destroy Sam right now. In addition to the tweet that I read that he wrote earlier in 2012, in addition to his disgusting career as a fucking dating guy and a pseudo-motivation woo-woo guy with alt-right bullshit and Trump hucksterism, this motherfucker promoted the conspiracy theories related to Comet Pizza, which were all funny enough when we were joking about Bill Clinton being like, I'd like to order a large pie and a small child. But it turned out to not be funny when some guy actually went there, I believe after, in that case, watching Alex Jones, actually went to Comet Pizza with a loaded weapon.
Alex Jones, which Cernovich has been on.
Alex Jones, which Cernovich has been on, and pissed Alex Jones off because he's so bad at TV. This is a Vic Berger cut of Mike Cernovich promoting that conspiracy theory.
The Comet, the whole story took the wrong turn. The reason that's why I never mentioned the place by name.
Well, people spun that whole pizza thing out of completely away from what I was talking.
But can you understand the connection between the two? You tweeting about Pizzagate and you tweeting about the Clintons being involved in pedophilia ring led to this shooting in broad daylight in a pizza restaurant in DC.
No, because I'm not connected to what other people are saying on the internet.
Do you think it's possible that there are still children trapped in the basement of a pizzeria in Washington? And if so, do you know how they're doing?
Yeah, that was definitely fake, and I never said that. And nobody can find an example of me saying that.
So there is a torture chamber. There is some kind of torture dungeon. They do have sex cult meetings that Podesta invites his family to. I know Comet Pizza. I talked about Comet Pizza last night. I tweeted out the Comet Pizza last night. I do believe that they're watching snuff film. I believe that they're watching snuff films down there, and I would not be surprised if they're also watching child pornography down there. You need to build an underground vault so the police can't barge in the door. That is what it is. It's about watching. They could be sacrificing people down there. I mean, they should be combing it for hairs of children. So it's now confirmed that Disrupt J20 is a pedophile recruiting organization. What they are trying to do is they're trying to find young, gullible children, teenage boys, little girls, not even 17-year-olds, but 13-year-olds, 12-year-olds. They're trying to recruit them for pedophilia. And you know where they held their meeting? Do you know where they held their meeting? The Comet Ping Pong. Unbelievable, right? They literally met at Comet Ping Pong. Whew. Just when you thought it couldn't get weirder. Man, just when you think it couldn't get weirder, when you couldn't get weirder, it gets weirder. Anybody claiming that the gunman today at Comet Pizza had anything to do with Pizzagate is lying. Why do I look so frazzled?
So apparently NPR couldn't dig that up, but Vic Berger could. This is the guy who is trying to destroy Sam because Sam made a ironic and actually somewhat funny, I will maintain that Sam is not as funny as me, tweet about Roman Polanski, condemning people justifying that behavior. If we were to take a bet, and this is, I guess, pre-making up stories and fantasies and conspiracy theories about Comet Pizza, but if we were to take a bet, who do you think takes abuse of women and children more seriously, Mike Cernovich or Sam Sita? Who we put literally every single asset that we could get our hands on.
Well, we know what this is. I mean, that's obvious a question, but we know what this is. This is counterpunching because Cernovich knows that he should be banned from Twitter. He saw what happened to Baked Alaska. Posobiec should as well for outing a freaking accuser of Roy Moore. Like, these people should be fucking done on social media.
Done. They're fucking poison.
And it's so cheap too, because these people literally care about nobody. So to sit around and act like, oh, I'm so offended, I'm so worried about all these women now, is so ridiculous and two-faced in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, look, we all know what it is, but I think and this all goes back in some respects. And, now at this point, I would think it's incredible. I don't know about Sobiak, but I would assume with him. But I think with Cernovich, I think Cernovich has worked his way where he does have connections to actual players in Republican politics.
All you need to do is have an outlet that Roger Stone can say, hey, I'll dump this to you.
Yeah, I would guess if I had to speculate something like that. Absolutely. That's the type of relationships that this, I'll say again, this troglodyte has created for himself. But there is a forerunner for this troglodytic behavior, and this involves a really, truly loathsome character named James O'Keefe, who has had serious backing from Republican donors in the past. We were just enjoying over the last couple of days the utter humiliation that seems almost certainly to be a result of James O'Keefe. So basically, O'Keefe does these quote-unquote sting operations where he sends fake people in to try to expose news organizations. And a woman who, I guess, I don't know if it's been, I don't think O'Keefe has commented on it yet. He hasn't confirmed or denied. It seems totally obvious. That it
would seem to be an easy thing to dispute. If she did not work for you, you would say no, not like, let me get to this meeting, I can't talk to you now.
He refuses to say no. There's a woman who is reported to be seen going into his offices, and she approached the Washington Post with a story about Roy Moore assaulting her as a teenager. The Post followed it up. They did not trust her story, and they turned the tables on her, and they did a great report on this kind of bizarre, by all appearances, attempt of this woman to hoodwink them, and all sort of fingers point back to O'Keefe, who does this sort of scummy thing. His record goes back to destroying Acorn with some totally disingenuous bullshit videos, and he's received a lot of funding from some of the worst people in the country over the years. And here he is, after completely failing in his attempt to embarrass the Washington Post. He got some undercover video of a Post security reporter, I believe, essentially saying to him the amazing, shocking news that actually there's a firewall between the Washington Post's opinion section and reporting section. Essentially, his big scoop on the Washington Post is that there's a reporter who thinks some of the opinion columns are too harsh on Trump, and that there's a firewall between reporting and opinion. But what you might need to do, I guess, if you come up as a total failure in your pursuits, is still put out a lame video for your idiot followers. And if you're us, the only way to make the medicine go down of having to even know that someone like James O'Keefe shares the planet with you is doing another Vic Berger cut. This is Vic Berger's rendition of James O'Keefe's explosive findings of the Washington Post.
American Pravda, Washington Post edition. Today, the Washington Post is floundering. They're spending a ton of time and money trying to turn the tables on Project Veritas, talking about an imagined sting. But why are they so afraid? What are they so afraid of? Why are they so afraid? What are they guarding against? Well, it turns out Project Veritas has done an undercover investigation into the Washington Post. The motto of the Washington Post is democracy dies in darkness. We think democracy dies when the media has a very biased agenda they don't reveal to the public.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Well, today, you're going to see and hear that agenda for the first time, and firsthand, from the Washington Post's national security correspondent, Dan Lamar.
There's the news side that's just trying to cover it critically and call bull when they're full, but also like giving credit when there's credit. And then there's like the other side of it as like, the opinion from God, like the Washington Post institutional voice, and that's like the editorial.
See, Washington Post, democracy does die in darkness, but it also dies in silence, too.
Look. God, why do these people exist? What combination of market incentive, warped childhood, racism, lack of sex? I don't even know.
Well,
what could possibly produce these sick humans?
I'm not an expert on Russian politics, but they're fucked from the beginning with American Pravda, because I don't think Pravda has a history of going against the head of state in a sort of like coup type atmosphere. I think the idea is generally that they go along with it.
No, Pravda was known for totally vicious, relentless coverage of the head of the Secretariat of the Soviet Union. That's literally what Pravda is known for. Anytime there was a new head of the Soviet system, Pravda really tore into them. That was their job.
We know what the American Pravda would be.
Yes. I think we have a sense of it. I think it is presented to you by a handful of people who are literally the stupidest people on earth every morning, begins the day-long coverage of the American Pravda.
I imagine, do you think the Pravda people were as dumb as the Fox News people? Probably smarter, right?
I would assume they're smarter.
Yeah.
But look, as much as I'm a talk and visual medium guy, but I do think maybe writing requires just a certain base level. Although then again, Brian Kilmeade's published a lot of books.
Yeah, co-published.
Yeah, co. Keyword. All right, let's take a call.
Imagine being a writer and needing Kilmeade to sell books that you wrote.
Oh, that's like some type of like who would be? That would be. I feel like a good. That's a Coen Brothers movie.
It's like
everything is a Coen Brothers movie now. James O'Keefe, like the weird woman who was doing the scam, is a Coen Brothers character. The guy whose career, like he's like trying to write the great American novel, but he keeps having to co-write books with Brian Kilmeade.
It's like joining random NBA player like Brian Scalabrini's NBA team to win a championship.
Yes. Exactly.
Although, to be fair, Kilmeade does get on the bestseller list, which is very disappointing. I saw him all over airports. His new book is all over airports.
I did too. I did note that. I tried to block that from my memory. What the fuck? You're calling from a 617 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Michael. It's Susan Collins calling from Maine.
This is woke Susan Collins. You know what? I am very angry at you, Susan Collins, because it looks like you were going to vote for this horrific tax bill.
That's how the game is played, Michael. I have to put up multiple fronts in order to ensure that the state is toppled from within.
Okay.
But I can't show all my cards at once.
All right. Respect. Fair enough.
So please be patient.
Okay. I will be patient.
I have been in touch with Eric Olin Wright and Carol Pateman, and we've been talking about universal basic income. So expect some surprises in the next Senate session.
Do you have any insults that you would like to direct at Mike Cernovich? Perhaps anything come to mind? Are you familiar with this Mike Cernovich character?
Oh, indeed. He tries to assault various of my followers, but like dirt off the shoulder, as Jay-Z says.
I think that's a good message.
I think that's perfect. Senator Susan Collins, thank you so much as always. Appreciate your time.
I did want to say, if bullshit could float, Cernovich would be admiral of the fleet.
Ah, I like it. Thank you, Senator Collins.
And he's as useless as an asshole with taste buds.
Oh, ooh. It's a little too vulgar for me even, Senator Collins. Thank you. Jesus. Wow. That's a lot. All right, let's have a little palate clear. Let us turn to Jordan Peterson. When you saw this clip earlier today, David Grisham, you had a good, an interesting response to this clip. What was that response?
Oh my God! Somebody needs to get him a glass of water.
Someone needs to get him a glass of water.
Moses.
So, the reason that I am interested in Jordan Peterson is, look, there's a couple of different things going on here. There's no doubt that on some college campuses, there is a form of whatever you want to call it, wokeness, PC, student activism, or whatever, which is very stupid. And it's stupid for a couple of reasons. One, I really do believe, really fundamentally, I think at any time you have one of these scumbags, like that little twerp Ben Shapiro, whose impression will be debuting soon, by the way, come on your campus, protest them, ridicule them, humiliate them. They're ridiculous. Don't try to get them. Don't go to the administration to ban them. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with it because I do think that we are strong enough politically to support, free speech. And I also think, and look, and I don't confuse platform with speech. Absolutely not. And that's a totally disingenuous thing that these right-wing idiots whinge about. But the truth of the matter is that at the end of the day, if we get into that control game, it's going to be used against the actual left. Ultimately, these people with these right-wing platforms are always going to be funded by plutocrats. They're always going to have all sorts of forums on television and other outlets. The university is a place that is not, I wouldn't consider it, in fact, a leftist space, but there is some opportunity, there's some openings, and as soon as we open control from a standpoint of manners, that's always going to get reversed and flipped on the actual left. Secondly, our arguments and our overall strategic viewpoint is more rigorous, more ethical, and infinitely more relevant to infinitely more people's lives than any of these reactionary idiots. What Jordan Peterson does is he takes tiny 2% micro truths about incredibly limited situations and uses that to extrapolate on a paranoid, bigoted, ahistorical, bizarre worldview. But he seduces people in two outlets. One, which I think we're going to need to think about on the left, is he spends a lot of time talking to young men about how they can get paid and get laid, essentially. And if we're being honest, that is where a lot of people's minds are at, right? So he's doing a kind of self-help hustle, which he brings into a broader kind of map of essentially soft alt-right politics. And then two, he uses obscure, often irrelevant, often small community-based problems at college campuses to build a grand paranoid narrative. What were you going to say, David, when you sucked your teeth? Go ahead.
Oh, I mean, I didn't have anything. I mean, he's just sort of out of his mind every time
Yes.
I listen to him.
He is completely out of his mind. So, but what he does is he takes tiny, tiny, tiny doses of the truth, grafts them onto young white men's insecurities, and then builds a worldview of paranoia and fantasy. And this is how many people are seduced into soft alt-right thinking that this guy exemplifies. And part of the mission of this show is to destroy the alt-right root and branch by cutting off their areas for oxygen where we have weaknesses and then exposing the whole fraudulent, silly, historical enterprise for what it is. And this is this clip of Jordan Peterson having an emotional breakdown based on his ahistorical fantasies, insecurities, bigotries, and personal resentments that he's turning into a broader message, which, by the way, is an incredibly lucrative side hustle for him. Look at him on Patreon. Here he is.
A close reading of 20th century history indicates, as nothing else can, the horrors that accompany loss of faith in the idea of the individual. It is only the individual, after all, who suffers. The group does not suffer. Only those who compose it. Thus, the reality of the individual must be regarded as primary. If suffering is to be regarded seriously.
So, I don't know. Jordan Peterson is crying there, and I guess apparently his point is that, of course, anytime there's a form of mass killing or mass discrimination, it's never a shared collective identity. So each slave, as an example, is just like, I am suffering on my own. There is no collective experience here. It is only me as an individual suffering. We just happen to all be being literally stolen as humans, ripped from a continent, raped, killed, murdered, sold, and forced into servitude for no money, no pay, and constant life abuse. But I experience this only as an individual, even though the only reason that this is happening is because of a distinguishing characteristic of my race. And by the way, that describes almost every single system of mass social, racial, sexual oppression category that there is. And yes, ultimately, there is a massive individual consequence to that. Read Invisible Man. The point of Invisible Man, though, wasn't that don't do anything about collective civil rights and American apartheid because I'm an individual. The point was, because of American apartheid, I cannot flourish as an individual. The professor, as usual, has it as exactly backwards. I think that the reason that it's so, and then also, let's add on this. This guy is making a whole career that started really simply because there was a directive in Canada that essentially said if you have a job like being a college professor at a public university, you have to respect people's gender identity. Okay? In other words, don't be a fucking asshole if you're a public service provider. And incidentally, nothing to do with the content of your class. Jordan Peterson teaches all sorts of one-dimensional, discredited IQ stuff. He can say whatever he wants about transgender people from a quote-unquote psychotherapeutic perspective. He can say whatever he wants about traditional dominance hierarchies and women, and the whole thing is crazy. All he literally needs to do is if someone comes into his class and says, this is my identity, he has to just say it. Because it's basic social etiquette, which in Canada they're enforcing with the little teeth. Not, you can go to jail. None of that. Because incidentally, Jordan Peterson is still a tenured, compensated professor who is saying, not only does he say whatever he wants in his videos, he uses some of his class videos to promote his side hustle, which is a soft, alt-right wing, freaked out paranoiac. The guy's freedom of speech has been exploded beyond the margins. There's no reason any of us should know who the fuck this hysterical man is. The gender pronoun thing has been nothing but an unending win for him. And if you ever want to encourage your friends to become a patron of the Michael Brooks Show, maybe show them how much money this hysterical fool is making on Patreon with his anti-transgender nonsense. But what he does is he takes small areas, and this is what Adam and I are doing, frankly, when we talk about anti-essentialism and some of the sort of excesses and ludicrousness of a certain kind of dumbed-down pseudo-woke politics. He uses those angles to cut through to create a lane of what he really should be doing, which is that, hey, there is a small problem on college campuses of some people being overzealous in a way that harms academic exercise, in a way that can be silly, in a way that can undermine, in fact, a certain level of freedom of speech. I should deal with that in my small community. And then maybe shut the fuck up about the broader state of the world. But of course, what he's doing is taking these small marginal things, which are relevant in a community context, to build up a hysterical narrative about cultural Marxism, which is just a soft alt-right narrative, because essentially what he's doing is that instead of overtly saying that Muslims and Mexicans and women and blah, 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 and black people are degrading the civilization with their genes or their culture, or pick your variety of bigotry, it's cultural Marxists are creating relativism, which is undermining everything and how the individual. The whole thing is crazy. These people have an unbelievable racket for themselves. And there's a lot of misguided young white ISIS out there that are going to find it interesting. And we need to cut it off at the root. Do you guys have any thoughts about this? I mean, because this is honestly, as hysterical as it is, this is a big problem.
I mean, I honestly need to know what was going on before that clip because I don't know how you can get that worked up.
My wife wouldn't blow me, and I can't say that my TA has a nice rack anymore because of the transgender postmodernist communist. The whole thing is crazy. I'm making a lot of money on Patreon, and I'm still a tenured professor, and everybody sticks a mic in my face, and I have weird, disturbed young men that follow my every word, but life isn't fair because there's trannies. Yes, Matt.
Oh, I don't have anything terribly new to add about Peterson. I mean,
yeah. But the whole milieu, I mean, this is part of a broader ecosystem.
I mean, I wonder how it will age. You know, I don't know if all these guys start conglomerating in like 5 years and there's like a mothership of all this shit.
Right.
I just, to me, like, and maybe this is too optimistic, and it probably is, but I just don't feel like I don't know how any of these people sustain this because there's nothing to them. Like, it's like, and I don't follow Peterson as much as I see like Dave Rubin or something like that, but it's clear that like they hit the same beats every single time.
Right.
And how many years are you going to be able to do that? And yeah, I mean, he's a.
But isn't this? I think this is the new iteration. This is the culture. I mean, a part of me would like to think it goes away, but like, look, for younger people, listening to Rush isn't relevant. And the Christian stuff isn't relevant, although Peterson does do some religious stuff. But this is the new stand-in for misplaced economic anxiety and a reinvented form of white aggrievement. So I think that maybe it will go away, but I also think that this is all the template for the cultural politics that we're going to have to deal with. And we're going to have to deal with cultural politics from the right because that's all they have.
The main difference is the scale and the audience share. So, like, Russia's almost monoculture for this stuff.
But there's no monoculture for any of us anymore. That's part of the new media environment.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm saying. But I feel like that lack of, like, because all this stuff is so insular and talking to itself, like, I just wonder what it's like to be a baked Alaska fan and see him having a meltdown at In-N-Out and think like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be on this.
That's a real man right there.
I'm gonna be on this guy's team for another like 5 years. It's just weird to me. And maybe that's not what they need. They don't need people that are coming at the time. They just need to pick up whoever's fascist for the moment.
Right.
But I don't know.
Right. Anyways, that was Jordan Peterson. Fucking unbelievable. You're calling from a 201 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, what's up, Mike? It's Max from Midtown.
Hey, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Well, this isn't really what I want to talk about, but just real quick, Jordan Peterson, I know I harp on this a lot, but he got a huge Joe Rogan bump.
Right.
Like, if you look at his money, like, I would guarantee his popularity and his exposure, like he's been on that show a bunch of times, and then like that dude sings his praises nonstop.
Have you ever smoked
a lot of this
weed?
A lot of this shit stems from that, man.
Have you ever smoked weed? No, I haven't smoked weed, but I will tell you this. I couldn't tell my TA that her ass looked so good that I prematurely ejaculated. Now, that might sound like quote-unquote harassment, but I just want to table that. Yeah, man, I mean, look, I think...
And you know what? I don't want to be... I don't want to be, disrespectful to any groups, because, like, sometimes, you make jokes, like, not you personally, but, like, we make jokes about a certain person, but, like, that has, like, an effect on, like, other marginalized groups, but, like... Right. If you go to Rogan's Twitter page, every other tweet is about trans something or other. So, I mean, something's going on there, man.
Dude, I have no doubt that the common thread, and I mean, look, I kind of don't want to completely throw Rogan under the bus because I think that, like, I mean, I haven't wanted to because I think that he, at the very least, used to be a little bit more of like an equitable meathead. and I've appreciated some of the stuff that he said, right? Like, I mean, he's kind of like, yeah, Abby Martin, and blah. And like, I don't hate the guy, and honestly, like, dude, I think people like me and Adam Proctor would be fucking amazing if we went on Joe Rogan.
I have cousins that came out to me over Thanksgiving as big Joe Rogan fans,
and they were idiots.
Oh no!
I mean, they're going to podcasts in a place of curiosity.
But I just want to say, but no, finish what you're saying in a second. I just want to say though, like, it is so clear from even a cursory glance that with Rogan and with Peterson, I mean, literally this whole career that Peterson has, there is a deep, deep, deep anxiety and freak out about transgender people. It's so fucking obvious. And so much of these things just come back to this just kind of like, oh yeah, but boys are boys and girls are girls. And I'm not even, look, there could be total excesses and, you know, like, and I don't think everything is culturally determined. I think there is some biological realities, of course, but like that you could be an adult and be this freaked out about people's identity, people's, you know, expression. I mean, that is where I do think Matt is right. I think in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, I'm not saying, I mean, because there's still a huge amount of work to do for gay and lesbian rights, but I just think the same way that like maybe 20 years ago people were like, gay people, and it was like a lot, and now it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? You're a moron. Yeah. It's going to be the same with transgender people, and these people are totally embarrassing themselves, and they're, you know, the freak out is very obvious. So it does not surprise me that Rogan's Twitter feed looks like that. Anyways, go ahead, man.
To take it a little bit more cynically, I think that he saw how Adam Carolla started making, like, Adam Carolla is not funny, like, even when he was like back in the day, right?
Right.
I think that he saw how Adam Carolla started taking this right turn and got this big profile, and he was like, I'm more talented than this guy.
Right.
So if all I have to do is play this little shell game, right? Because he does the same shit. Rogan is like, oh, I'm for universal, everyone should have health care, but also don't give the federal government money, right? Like, as soon as you say those two things, like, you've lost me. Like, you're done, you know what I mean?
Look, a lot of people are politically...
I'm more talented.
Yeah, these people are politically illiterate, no doubt. I mean, I think, you know, the other thing, too, is that there's a kind of, whether or not it's cynical, I'm not going to speculate about Joe Rogan's motives. And I clearly, like, I have a much bigger soft spot for Joe Rogan than any of these other people.
I think he's autodidact bro.
I think he's an autodidact bro, and I have sympathy for autodidact bros. But like,
but you guys have had some good labels on this call.
Yeah, we're doing good. What I used to call him, an equitable meathead. Equitable meathead and autodidact bro. But look, I mean, the reality is that there is no easier content in the world than college campus bullshit. And this is another thing, like, this is another basic dividing line that people don't seem to be able to understand. It is totally easy to say, and in fact, I would say if you're on the actual left, it is probably more relevant to us than anybody else, that some forms of campus politics are stupid and self-defeating and not analytical. They don't have an understanding of economics. They're not emotionally intelligent, and there's real problems there, right? And also the reality is that it is a minuscule speck on, first of all, the overall reality of most campus activism, which is still incredibly important and positive, and also just the overall reality of society, which is like, if you're getting up in the morning and you're worried about college campus controversies, you're living in a fucking fantasy world. We have unraveling arms control agreements, net neutrality is being gutted, the climate, you know, we're about to lose, I think, a third of species by 2020. We have, people don't have health care. We are in an incredibly dangerous and opportune moment, and people want to worry about, like, well, you know, did you know that Oberlin, like, there isn't like taco night anymore because it's racist? Like, look, if you want to spend your life being scared about Oberlin and listening to Jordan Peterson histrionics, I mean, sure, whatever emotional need that fulfills for you, great. But from a content creator perspective, I could tell you, man, if I did a show that was like, college campuses, they sure are out of control, ha ha ha, and transgender people, that's so weird. She's a girl, but now she's a boy. I would have hundreds of thousands of Twitter followers. I'd probably have a Fox show, and I'd probably be making like $50,000 a month on Patreon. It's the easiest thing in the world to do. So without, ascribing specific motives, anytime you see somebody who in today's world is telling you that campus shit is like somehow important in the grand scheme of things, you should immediately dismiss them. Like sight unseen, essentially. Because it's
so
bullshit.
You gotta give me one more minute though to ask you a question, all right?
All right. Yes.
All right. So like this is deeply personal, but I feel like I could frame it in a way that, could have like utility for like other people, right?
Okay.
Like, I don't know if you've experienced, we've all experienced things personally that like get us sad, get us depressed, whatever.
Yep.
When you're going through something like that, like how do you, because I know you read a lot outside of like politics, I know you read a lot of, like other kind of like authors. I know you're mindfulness and all that, and you're into that stuff. Right. And I'm not, so like I'm sincerely asking, like when like stuff in your personal life like is really like topsy-turvy, like how do you avoid like slipping into apathy? Because like I'm not gonna lie, I'm at a point right now where like I just can't even like muster up. You know what I mean?
So
like,
let me tell you honestly, I don't know how you do it. I find exercise important, and I'll give you some cliches: meditation, exercise. One of my main teachers, a woman named Susan Green, who's listening, I hope, always taught me, and I sincerely mean this, if you can get in touch with the anger, not just the depression, but what's really pissing you off. And by the way, not to be angry at a person or do anything harmful or anything like that, to be really clear. But getting in touch
talk offline, but anyway.
Yeah, getting in touch with how angry you are can be a great fuel. Like, fuck that. I'm going to get up and do what I need to do. So you get rid of, because depression just knocks you out and it's fucking useless. But if you can even get to the point where you're pissed off and you're livid enough that there's no way that the person or the circumstance or the thing is going to block you from what you're supposed to do, that will like literally give you a lot of energy. Anger is like a much better place to be in than depression. And then channel the anger in a smart, productive way.
Positive way.
But I don't know if that makes sense. But I think like whatever's behind the sadness is definitely being pissed off. And then you got to be like Nas, like silent rage behind vintage shades. And then you're good to go.
Yeah. All right, brother. Thank you, man.
No, for real. Take care, man. Call back in.
All right.
Take care, man.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
What do you guys do?
When I get depressed at the news?
Or just in general. I think that might have been an even bigger picture.
Oh, self-medicate.
Okay, man. Great.
No, specifically the news, like I think you have to dive into, and this seems counterintuitive, and maybe it is for other people, but for me it really works, is you dive into histories of when it was worse, whatever given parameter you think is bad now.
Get in touch with anger.
You can play with the absurdity of the world too. I always find a little bit of joy in that.
Yes.
When shit gets really stupid, it's just like even like this Republican tax plan right now. It's like sometimes I get like so upset, and then I realize how ridiculous this whole thing is. I mean, they're taking away tax breaks for people who have catastrophic medical costs and giving it to billionaires.
Yeah,
well,
why would we want
absurd.
that? Billionaires are nicer people. God, Paul Ryan is such a fucking grotesque human being. All right, do we have this morning Joe clip? What did you say? We're going to take one more call, read some IMs, and then we're going to... Oh, wait, we have Discord questions as well. Let me see. Let me read. What do we have? First Discord question. Do you see a way to pump the brakes on the big media buyout by right-wing conglomerates, Coke-backed Meredith Sinclair Broadcasting? No, I don't. I mean, these are like, I think in some ways there are some things that honestly you need to look at it from a long-term trend perspective. And the reality is that we're in the best of times and the worst of times. So the plutocrats, these people, like, we're in a phase of capitalism and governance where they're making like a very serious play for everything and to really structurally create this kind of neo-feudal society. And then on the other hand, I mean, like, Bernie Sanders is the Democratic frontrunner in 2020. You know, like, DSA is growing. There is a real serious appetite to actually intervene in history again and actually improve people's lives. And we need to have some faith that we can collectively create that and do that and not get, I mean, we need to respond when we can, and we need to jam the phones against the tax giveaway to the rich and net neutrality and savor the accomplishment of saving the modest schemes of Obamacare. But we can't get bogged down in each and every one of these things because, yes, they're horrible and these people are ascendant and it's an onslaught, and we need to be building and creating the future so that in 6 or 7 years, you know, the Koch brothers and the evil people and the bad people are sitting on these shows and they're like, oh my God, they did another thing to help people. Oh my God, they did another thing to protect the environment. This is such a terrible day. That's what we need to create.
That makes me think of something I was thinking about over the break. Is there's a sense in which what we're after is not really a revolution, but a counter-revolution.
Yes,
like
exactly.
Like basically what's been going on since Goldwater, or maybe you want to push it up to Reagan, or whenever you want to start the clock, is they have completely, like, what they wanted to do as far as a corporate revolution. They're basically in phase 4 of that now, and this is sort of the end game. And I think basically we need to figure out how to make them fail and how to draw more attention to what exactly they're trying to do.
That's exactly right. We need to make it so that in several years, and I've said this before, but this really has to be the goal, that they're going to sit back and they're going to be like, wow, why did we have to go and try to steal that last 2%? We were fucking coasting. And if we could have just sat back and not completely tried to destroy and rob so much, we could have had this incredibly unequal, fucked up status quo. But because we went for the full home invasion, it came back in our face, and now we're losing all of it. David.
Yeah, I mean, every kind of revolution has its own restoration. And, I think this is our opportunity to, if it's gone so bad now, if the right wing has gotten so much control and they're privatizing everything, I mean, we really have a great opportunity to tear all this shit down.
That's exactly right. And that's, again, why we can't think. This is another practical reason when we cannot think neoliberal. Have Jade and Michael seen the ESPN segment on the shoe store where basketball players bought their dress shoes? The owner was offered to sell out to the guy who created Zappos, but he didn't sell. I didn't see that. There's a really, really interesting New Yorker story about a guy named Dapper Dan who owned a boutique in Harlem where he made these suits in the 80s. Honestly, they didn't really look that good, but they were like kind of like not exactly Gucci knockoffs, but they were like, he would design like upper end wear that people like Mike Tyson and stuff bought from him, but it was made literally in the community, and he would like strap G's on it. There's a Jay-Z lyric where he says, like, I think it's like, I have a G on my chest, I don't need Dapper Dan, which is that like he's wearing actual Gucci, not Dapper Dan. But there is like an interesting history there about, clothing boutiques and selling out and not selling out, and the sort of wider culture, which I do want to kind of follow up on some of those types of topics in the future. Okay, let's play this. This was Morning Joe, Meek and Joe. I don't even remember now. Matt, what were they talking about? Yeah, let's just play it.
Yeah, it's just Trump.
We just decided earlier that right-wing Mandela would respond.
Later they get into that Sarah Huckabee Sanders defended Trump for the Pocahontas thing.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders is a fucking thoroughbred. She looks like she's been hit by a shovel and she just keeps going.
Weekend, many in harm's way, while promoting a website that lavishes him with praise and spreads conspiracy theories. The president tweeted, quote, "Fox News is much more important in the United States than CNN. But outside of the U.S., CNN International is still a major source of fake news, and they represent our nation," this is the president, "our nation to the world very poorly. The outside world does not see the truth from them." Less than an hour later, the president retweeted a purported accomplishment list by the website, I swear to God, MAGA
Mega pill.
MAGA pill.
and wrote, "Wow, I didn't realize we did so
Pause
much
it.
with
David Slavic says MAGA pill is Reddit is a Verret for people who win elections.
the fake news would report." Thank you. The conservative Weekly Standard described President Trump's suggested news source as a sycophantic website that traffics in conspiracy theories and has aligned itself to the alt-right and white nationalist movements. Among the claims, false flag terrorism and mass shootings for gun control, also earthquake machines to destabilize regions, and the use of trauma-based mind control. And that's in just one post.
Okay.
This, as the president complained about the Russia investigation and claimed, "I have the economy booming and I have possibly done more than any 10-month president." You know what? I'm sorry. This is where somebody on the set needs to say, wow, that person seems unhinged, imbalanced, and not fit to be president.
You just did.
Okay.
You just did.
I mean, he really seems out of his mind.
First of all, bad face job, insecure, Mika. Where is the lie? Tell me one fucking lie. Has the weather machine hurt your already feeble brain, Mika? The American press, which is a fake press, goes overseas to tell gullible people who have different genetic backgrounds that Trump is doing a bad job when he's doing a tremendous fucking job. Then Morning Joe goes and lies to the gay members of Congress that are running on treadmills after kicking out the rent boys that they have gotten to their apartments during their morning workouts that Trump is doing a bad job so that they can fund the GE Barack Obama weather machine, which will bring Sharia. And this is what Joe and Mika do every day. That's why she's crazy Mika and stupid Joe. Totally unfair. Name a single lie. Can either of you two inebriated high young men name a single lie that President Trump, who has done a tremendous fucking job, has told? Name one lie.
Later in the clip, she asked Sarah Huckabee how she could look in a mirror, which...
First of all, asking Sarah Huckabee looks in the mirror the same way Gandhi went on the Salt March, you bitch. Tremendous courage. This is how Sarah Huckabee looks in the mirror. Sarah Huckabee looking in the mirror shows more grit and character than Mika has ever shown in her entirely miserable, melodramatic life. But it's fine. Team and I, Sarah Huckabee, and go blow Joe. That's fine.
Maybe it'd be helpful if Sarah could seduce Morning Joe. I don't know.
Yeah. Sarah will seduce Morning Joe when the Jews dominate NBA. Sarah will seduce Joe when the Chinese dominate the Source Awards. I'm doing things that are ethically improbable to illustrate the reality of Sarah. But you people, you are so great, so liberal, have such high values. Meanwhile, you slander a hero like Sarah Huckabee. Total fake news. Totally unfair. All right, let me... Oh, you dropped. I was just about to get to you. Oh, all right. Well, now we're off then. All right, let me race through these IMs. Scumpy Style. I lived in Botswana as a kid from 1980 to 83, and I remember all the names Hannah brought up from those early days of Southern African independence movements, but the details are hazy. Is there a book you can recommend to brush up on?
I'm actually, and I just recommended this. We're doing Facebook book recommendations. Really, The Legacy of Liberation, Thabo Mbeki and the Future of the South African Dream. It's a biography of a fascinating political leader, kind of inscrutable and problematic, but also brilliant and interesting one. And there's a lot of doorways into different Southern African politics. There's Our Guns, Our Votes by Robert Mugabe, about Robert Mugabe is decent, but I would start with the Thabo book. Botswana has gone to be exactly the example that Hannah held up as possible. Oh, that's cool. I want to look into that more. Ryan Cole.
Just jumping on that, I'd like some good news from Africa every once in a while. It'd be nice to do that as a segment.
Yes. There is, in fact, good news from Africa, and we will do that. We'll start including that. That's a good point. Let's see. Ryan Cole. Marx/Frederick Douglass joke. I made the Marx-Frederick Douglass joke last week. Mike Cernovich was accused of rape and pled it down to sexual misdemeanor. I don't know. I have to look that up. Is that true?
I wouldn't want to say whether I think that's plausible or not.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't want to say, but I will look that story up. Kilmeade's books don't really sell all that well. Bestseller lists are based on shipments to stores, and conservatives, think tanks order thousands of copies, which they give it as bonuses to subscribers. I worked in a bookstore for over 20 years.
That's the conscience of a conservative playbook.
It's the conscience of a fucking conservative.
The original Goldwater book was purchased up in bulk like that.
You could learn a few things from Barry Goldwater, you pre-transition anti-American little prick.
What is it with Canadian alt-right men being crybabies? Between Jordan Peterson and Stefan Mallieu, there isn't an alpha male north of the border. You know, I have to say...
You don't need to put alt-right in there.
I mean, honestly, it's like...
Just joking.
No, but there is like a weird... It is very odd that these guys who are so hyper obsessed with like normative gender roles and reinforcing those kind of hierarchies, like play out the biggest stereotypes and false representation. Like
they're so soft.
They're emotional wrecks who lose their shit over everything when they're not explaining why, like, women should work. It's a little weird.
I just don't understand. If you're foregrounding the individual, isn't whatever they want to identify as the most important thing?
No, yes, that's true until they want to identify as a tranny in my class. Give me money. I'm so afraid. And the final I am, Lewis from Texas. Speaking of someone who recently got laid.
Let's go Texas.
That's what I like to hear. Speaking of someone who recently got laid, that crybaby professor dude just needs to get laid. I truly believe that's why he's such a terrible person. And the whole thing is crazy. The whole thing is crazy. The cultural Marxism is crazy. I need to get my penis wet. It's crazy. Okay. Thank you all so much for the postgame. I really appreciate all patrons. We're growing. We're moving. I appreciate all of you immensely. I look forward to talking with you on calls and on Discord. On Sunday, we just recorded a fascinating conversation with Anthony Lappi, Illicit History on the Bolivian drug connect before Pablo Escobar and how it's connected to Operation Condor, CIA-backed death squads across Latin America, and the origins of the Iran-Contra affair.
Goes farther on the CIA drug stuff than I ever knew was established, which is very interesting.
And in a very grounded way. Next week, Ken Silverstein's Secret History of Lobbying on Illicit History. We have got some new theory reading coming for you, maybe even some original writing. Appreciate all of you. Thank you, David Slavic. Thank you, Matt Leck. Thank you, David Grishcom. See you on Sunday and then back live on Tuesday. Thanks, everybody.